and welcome to Full Circle. I'm Emily Wilmson with the City of Fort Collins, and today we're here to talk about downtown Fort Collins. I have today with us Josh Burks, Economic Health Director. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
And I have Matt Robinault, who is the Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
All right, great. Thanks for joining us, Matt. So let's kick it off first talking a little bit about the big renovation in Old Town Square. How long was the project in the works? What can people see who haven't been down there yet? What's going on?
Great question. So the DDA just wrapped up a 7-month-long construction project in mid-October. It was a renovation of Old Town Square, and we started that process with the city probably a good 3 years ago. And that was all of the planning, and then into the design phase, the public input process. And really the reason for it is that several things have changed. Just the sheer amount of patronage that we have in the downtown has grown over the years, and the way that the original square was designed.
Yeah.
We outgrew how we were using it, so we had to make some physical changes to it, and a lot of the infrastructure was beginning to show its age as well, and we were able to do a lot of utility upgrades and new systems for the plaza to make it function for another 30 to 40 years.
Okay, great. And now there's also some talk about maybe doing some additional work on Linden Street. Is that correct?
There is. When we were engaged in the design process for Old Town Square, we asked the design team to look at the 200 block of Linden Street and develop a concept for a hybrid street, which is an urban design model that allows vehicles and traffic to use or access the street for normal business hours, but then has the infrastructure in place to be easily shut down and function like an extension of the public pedestrian plaza that is Old Town Square.
Okay. Is there anything comparable like that in Fort Collins right now?
There is nothing like that in Fort Collins. The closest example is Fillmore Plaza in Cherry Creek in Denver.
Okay.
But this is a model that is very typical in European cities. It's referred to them as high streets, where businesses can be accessed during the day and becomes a pedestrian plaza during longer durations and festivals and events.
Okay, great. And you kicked that off this summer. Why is that? Meaning the renovation of Old Town Square.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that area so important to downtown, that gathering spot?
Well, you use the term gathering spot, and it is the community's gathering spot. It's our town square. It's the downtown's living room. It's really the foundation of all of the downtown's renovation efforts that began back in '81 when the DDA was created, and Gene Mitchell began to propose his concepts for the Old Town Square project. So
okay.
It's just been a vitally important gathering spot for the community, and continues to be so today.
I'm glad you brought up the DDA, because we should probably backtrack a little bit and tell people what is the Downtown Development Authority. And Josh, sorry not to ignore you here, but I
No problem.
figure that one Matt can
probably handle that one. Yeah, absolutely.
What is the DDA, and how does it work, and how does it partner with the city?
Well, the Development Authority is an authority of the City of Fort Collins. We're a separate legal entity, and our mission is to build public and private partnerships that advance the economic, cultural, and social growth of the downtown area. And we do that in several ways. We partner with building owners and private developers to help enhance the projects that they build in the downtown. And then we also build public places, enhance streetscapes, Old Town Square. We partner with the city on projects like Oak Street Plaza. So we're placemakers, and we enhance the built environment in the downtown.
Okay.
We do that with a mechanism called tax increment financing.
Okay, great. And so one of the projects you're working on with the city right now is the downtown parking garage, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Josh?
Sure. So we have this great opportunity to partner with the private sector. When Sage, McWhinney, and Bohemian announced that they were going to be building a hotel on the former site of the Armadillo Mexican restaurant that is at Walnut and Mountain. I always get Walnut and Willow mixed up.
Walnut and Chestnut.
Walnut and Chestnut. Thank you, Matt. And so their original plans just called for a surface parking lot. So we approached them, along with Matt's help at the DDA, to talk about doing something more in the way of parking. In 2013, the city went through and did a parking strategic plan for downtown. And one of the things it called to do was to look at increasing the amount and supply of parking in the downtown area, and to primarily try to do that through partnerships with the private sector. The idea being that we could basically leverage and take advantage of economies of scale when they're doing parking, add additional parking. So the project will be located what some might think of as behind the hotel. It would be at Chestnut and Jefferson. There's a building there that will be demolished to make way for the project. It'll have just over 300 parking spaces. Over 200 of those will be available and open to the public, and the remaining 100 will be used privately by the hotel to support their operations, valet parking, overnight guest parking.
Okay, and what's the timing on that project?
So they hope to break ground on the hotel probably in February timeframe of 2016, so not very far now, just a couple of months. They'll use the site that the parking structure is going to be on for a while as a staging area for the construction of the hotel, and likely break ground on the parking structure in April-May timeframe. And both the parking structure and the hotel will be open, hopefully for patrons to be attending in either February or March of 2017.
Okay. So now, Josh, this was something that went to City Council. Why? What's the talk a little bit about, and maybe Matt, you can jump in here too about
Right.
how this is funded and.
Yeah, so I'll let Matt talk a little bit about the partnership that we are contemplating between the DDA, and they've sort of preliminarily approved. The reason that it had to go to City Council is it being roughly estimated as a $12 million project all in. We're going to have between $7 and $8 million of cost that the city incurs. That was really the reason to take it to City Council, was to ensure that they were committed to the project and would be wanting to pursue financing to cover our $7 to $8 million cost. What Council approved in November on the 17th was basically a construction and purchase agreement. And that agreement simply stipulates that we will purchase what's going to amount to a condominium with parking spaces in it once the facility is constructed. Now that agreement, because of the TABOR, Taxpayer Bill of Rights legislation at the state level, has to be subject to annual appropriation, meaning that it's a commitment, and then next year Council has to take up an appropriation ordinance and a financing ordinance. So we'll be back to Council either in the middle of 2016 or the end of 2016 in anticipation of needing to have the money available to purchase the condominium unit when it's open and ready in early 2017.
Okay, great. Anything to add to that?
So the DDA's involvement in this is, while the city will be the part owner of the parking structure with the hotel development group, the DDA is going to partner with the city to help fund a portion of the cost of the public parking. Very similar to how the DDA, the City of Fort Collins, and Larimer County partnered to finance the Civic Center parking structure in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Right.
So this has been done before,
Yes,
in
it
other
is.
words.
We're repeating the same kind of partnership model. But this
Exactly.
time-
I mean, we're taking kind of the same revenue streams even that both the city and the DDA have pledged to the payment of the Civic Center parking structure, and, if you will, rolling those over into this new parking structure. So it's kind of money that's already been used for parking to pay for more parking.
Okay, gotcha. And so what is the buzz about the new hotel? Having a downtown hotel, that seems to be a big thing people are talking about. What's
That's
the
one
need
you've
for
been
that?
chasing for a long time,
Sure,
right?
it
Yeah.
precedes me at the DDA. This goes back to really back to Gene Mitchell. Shortly after he finished the original Old Town Square project in the early '80s, he pursued a downtown hotel on the block between College Avenue and Pine Street. It was going to be a Radisson hotel, and as with all great economic development efforts, there's usually competition involved in that. And Mr. Mitchell lost out to a hotel project further south in the community, which became the Holiday Inn, which is now the Hilton. And throughout the past several decades, there's been multiple efforts to try to obtain a hotel in the downtown. And Josh and I have been involved, I think, 3 different occasions since
Yep.
we've been working
Right.
together the past decade. And there were a couple of efforts that predate that. So this is the real deal now, and we're incredibly excited and very important for the downtown because while we have a wonderful lodging establishment in the downtown with the Armstrong Hotel, its size and scale is limited in room offerings. So this expands the number of rooms that will be available, and I think really provides opportunities for visitors, tourists to visit Fort Collins and experience all of the offerings that we have, whether that's an urban experience in our downtown, experiencing the natural offerings that we have in our county open space areas and whitewater rafting in the Poudre Canyon, so forth. This really provides a base for that to happen in the
base
downtown.
to explore the breweries that are very much part of Old Town and the community
Exactly.
as well, for sure. I think that when you look at the success that Old Town has had, this has been one of the missing ingredients for a long time to kind of just help it, achieve that next level of attraction in terms of leisure visitors and the kinds of things Matt's describing. So it's been a long time coming. I think it'll also potentially open up the opportunity for us to think about hosting larger conferences in a different way than we have in the past. The hotel is not coming with a big ballroom space, but we have a facility like that in the Lincoln Center. And we have started to see the trend where some conferences are looking actually spreading their activities out and not doing it all in a single conference venue. So I think we have some hope that maybe we'll be able to compete for that kind of business too, and offer a little bit different environment than some of the other competitors for that kind of business in the region.
And the parking garage is a key piece of this because we really, we have parking garages downtown,
Right.
but there's a need as we're growing, as more businesses come to town, more visitors. Talk a little bit about the importance of that garage. And you touched on a parking study
Right.
earlier.
Well, the 2013 parking study, has a demand analysis model in it that gives an estimate of what the future need for parking is going to be, and it estimates that future need of parking between basically 1,000 and 1,500 spaces, depending on whether or not another major performing arts center comes into downtown. That's for the next 10 years. This is going to deliver 200 spaces, so anywhere between up to maybe a fifth of the needed parking in the downtown area against that particular estimate. The other thing that the parking study talked about was the need to disperse parking. One of the challenges that we have with the parking today is that it's in a limited number of locations, and the most structured parking we have, the Civic Center parking structure at LaPorte and Mountain, is close to but somewhat removed from some of the activities that take place. And so the idea of being able to disperse parking throughout Old Town is really anticipating the need for people to participate in different areas within Old Town as Old Town continues to mature. So it's not only meeting demand that we have today, but it's also meeting the demand moving forward. There are some folks who in the community have said, well, do we really need more parking? I think if you drive around in Old Town and try to park on the street, you're gonna have trouble finding a parking spot. So I think you will think, yes, we need more parking there. And then if you start to think about, as the rest of Old Town begins to infill, places like the parking lot that's immediately adjacent to the Armadillo today, which provides parking, that's going away because we're putting a hotel there. So we're losing some of our parking supply as we continue to meet the demands of redevelopment in the Old Town area. Another example of that is there's a proposed project at the former Goodyear site just immediately to the east of the Remington parking, or what we call the Old Town parking structure there at Remington and Mountain, basically. And so that site is actually in conversations to utilize a portion of that parking structure, to meet their needs. And so that's going to take some supply there as well. So, it's about meeting the current demand. It's also about meeting the future demand. And I also think it's about trying to manage the parking we have in the Old Town area so that there's greater access and turnover.
I think it's important to point out this concept of dispersing
Right.
the structured parking around the downtown. The Old Town structure which is approximately 400 spaces, and the Civic Center structure, which is about 1,000 spaces, provide a fair amount of supply for the historic Old Town core. And that's important because a lot of the buildings, the lots that were developed back at the turn of the century and stuff, the building footprints utilize most of the land. So there's not an abundance of on-site parking for those buildings. But as you move further out from the historic core into other parts of the downtown area, where we're going to see and anticipate more infill projects, it makes sense to locate the structured parking right along with those projects, because I think the typical downtown patron, I think the rule of thumb is that they're willing to walk about a quarter mile or so from their vehicle to their whatever experience they're down here for.
Right.
That amounts to a couple of blocks, right? If you try to translate a quarter mile into the actual streetscape, right? So it's really not all that far when you stop and think about it in terms of people wanting to access the different activities. And I can't underscore enough Matt's point about, as we see more infill, what currently is parking that is supplied as surface parking on the periphery of the historic core, that goes away. And we want to see those slots used in very much the same way the historic lots have been used. As much of the lot is delivered as development as possible, that's going to leave little space for parking. And so consolidating and concentrating parking into parking structures is a big part of the strategy.
Yeah, I think it's important also to mention that's very deliberate in this community's planning that goes back into the late 80s, early 90s with the concept of using growth boundaries and eventually reaching the point where we're not sprawling out anymore, but we're building inward and upward in some of the vacant parcels, in the downtown being one of those areas that has those vacant parcels. So today they're used for surface parking. So the structured parking falls right in line with better utilization of that land.
Right. So these things are all interrelated. I think another way that the parking structure we've been talking about today is interrelated is, there was some resistance, I think, to the hybrid street idea on Linden until we started talking about a parking structure, because that starts to answer some of those needs that folks have, or some of the concerns they might have about this kind of a concept of a hybrid street. And where are my patrons who are still going to be coming down and hopefully patronizing my business when this activity is going on? Having that parking structure allows for you to start thinking about your limited public space in different ways as well.
So that's a good segue to some of the other development that's occurring downtown, and maybe we should talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about downtown and the Downtown Development Authority, because Woodward, which is building its new legacy campus, I guess is what we're calling that, is now part of downtown. So what are some other projects that people are going to see, and what do you define as the boundary of
downtown? The Downtown Development Authority's area of operations is really from Vine Drive south to Laurel, and then roughly Meldrum over to Library Park area. It's jagged around the edges and stuff intentionally, but it's mostly the commercial zoned areas within that area I described. Some of the projects that if folks were to go out and wander through the downtown streets today, some of the newest projects that they would see if they were to venture into the River District, which is north of Jefferson and south of the Poudre River. There's 3 new projects that are now open. One of them is the Encompass Technologies office building, known as Block 1. It's right just north of El Burrito. Immediately across the street from that is the Millhouse Apartments that just opened up last month. That's a development project by Lagunitas Development, and it's a all residential project. And then across the street from that is Wolverine Press Public House, Wolverine Farm Public House.
Okay.
And that's a small-scale redevelopment project, renovation of an existing building.
Okay.
And a lot of activity in the River District right now.
Yeah, and there's some talk eventually about maybe even, and this might be outside the boundaries of the DDA, but somehow getting breweries more connected among New Belgium and Odell's being walking distance of each other, sort of. Is there any movement there?
Part of that will be addressed with the Lincoln Corridor improvements.
Okay.
There's enhanced public infrastructure that's proposed along Lincoln, so that opens up the that portion of the downtown. Great opportunity for advancing an enhanced streetscape up to New Belgium along Linden Street as well.
Okay.
Well, and
great.
I think you've seen in there, I think maybe other sessions that have been recorded about downtown plan, but the downtown plan I think their study area goes a little bit beyond kind of the Downtown Development Authority's boundary and starts to include different character areas and how those all can sort of complement. And I think to me that's the future of Old Town, is that it's going to, as it continues to mature, it's going to have a greater diversity in the kinds of development, the styles of development, the architecture, hopefully, and the activities that take place in different parts of Old Town as infill continues to happen. And so the River District wants to have its sort of own character, and we want to encourage that. You've got the historic core, you've got places closer down in the Lincoln Center that are going to have a different character, those sorts of things. Even up along Vine Drive and around the museum and the new powerhouse partnership between the city and CSU. All of that's going to have their own little character and district feel, and then it's all going to be part of one big concept that we think of as Old Town. I think so that that's really exciting. And again, the DDA has been a big partner in a lot of that, and will continue to be as long as it's got the ability to use tax increment financing, I think.
And that continues through 2031.
Right. So we got a little more runway left, right?
Do we have room for a runway downtown?
Well, there's a runway that could be reused that's near Old Town, but that's maybe for another time.
Okay, we're joking, but anyway, well, sounds like there's lots of exciting things downtown, and I know this is a month December, when people are downtown anyway, shopping and hopefully shopping in Fort Collins, period.
Great time of year
Somewhere.
to get out and enjoy the stores and restaurants in Old Town.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
super.
Lights are beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you both for joining us. Any closing thoughts about the downtown redevelopment and parking garage and hotel and all the stuff we've talked about?
Great cities never stop focusing on their downtown, and it's something that this community, I think, has an opportunity to continue for many generations to come. So,
Awesome. Josh?
You're here.
Okay. Well, thanks to Matt and to Josh for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Full Circle.